Welcome to Top 5, a show where we count things down and blast them off to the stars.
3, 2, 1.
This week's Top 5 being brought to you by one of our favorite listeners out there. All you have to do is drop us an email to podcast@majorspoilers.com. You know who you are when you send us an email that says, hey, how about a Top 5 spaceships? And I'm starting my list off at number 5 with The Heart of Gold. Heart of Gold from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the cool thing about The Heart of Gold is it is all places in all times with all probabilities and outcomes happening simultaneously. That's when it engages its Heart of Gold drive. But for the rest of the improbability drive. But for the rest of the time, it looks like a cool running shoe. And if your spaceship looks like a cool running shoe, I think you got something going on. So my number 5.
Time they kicked it in, I love that moment where Zaphod is like, we just picked up 2 guys in space. One of them's my cousin and the other one's your ex-boyfriend. Yeah. Is this going to happen all the time? She's like, very probably.
Very probable. And I love how when they're coming back from improbable space into reality, how it counts down. The ship counts down to when you're back to normalcy. And also all the doors in the ship say have the what's it called? Not the happy chip, but they have something in there that as you walk through, they're like, glad to be of service. And then, of course, even though he wasn't part of the Heart of
personalities.
Gold. Yes, that's what it is. Marvin, the paranoid android, first appeared on the Heart of Gold. So
that's true.
There you go. That's my number 5, The Heart of Gold from Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Matthew, what do you have for your number 5?
Well, I was born in the 1970s, which means that when you say to me spaceship, the first thing that pops into my head is a space shuttle. I had toy space shuttles when I was a kid, but it's not just any space shuttle. Oh, no. The space shuttle, as used by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is about 125 feet long. Now imagine that it turned over and transformed into a 70-foot long locomotive. And then it could turn into a 30-foot tall robot. And that robot's name is Astro Train. One of the greatest, stupidest Transformers ever, because he literally had, okay, let's put it this way. Scale in Transformers is F-bombed. There's no way to explain the scale of the Transformers and have it make sense. Astro Train is 70 feet long as a locomotive, then turns into a 125-foot long space shuttle. All of the Decepticons get in this space shuttle in Transformers the movie. The Decepticons are between 30 and 45 feet tall. They're all inside. And then they start a fight, and Devastator, which is a giant robot made of 6 30-foot giant robots, is able to transform into his Devastator form inside of Astro Train. So clearly, Astro Train is not merely a spaceship that turns into a locomotive, but he actually bends the nature of reality, much like the Heart of Gold, except dumber. And also, he's purple. So if you say to me, hey, Matthew, you want a purple space shuttle? The answer is hell yeah, and some cheesy poofs. And that's why my number 5 is Astro Train, the triple changer transformer space shuttle / locomotive / freaky deaky robot.
Cool. Rodrigo, what do you have for number 5?
I do like that Matthew started with, I was born in the 70s, and then it ends with Astro Train. So I'm just going to pretend like it was nothing but prog rock in the middle until he got to Astro Train.
You got the roundabout.
All right. My number 5 is a ship that just makes sense, right? It's the Arrow Wing from the Mighty Ducks cartoon. That's right. There was a Mighty Ducks cartoon, not a cartoon based on the wildly popular Mighty Ducks movie, but in fact, a cartoon about ducks from space who were also hockey players, who were also superheroes, who were anthropomorphic ducks, and they rode around in a spaceship. And also they had like a van, like a duck van. But I'm talking about
duck van.
The Arrow, same company, the Arrow Wing, which just makes sense because as Matthew explained with the space shuttle is a real spaceship used by humans, and that's why the front of it looks like a human face. right?
It's funny.
Right. That's
And
exactly how it works.
that's why the arrow wing looks like a duck's face, because everything the Mighty Ducks had, for some reason, looked like a duck's face. So if you want to fly around the stars in a ship that looks like a duck, then I would recommend the arrow wing.
That's my favorite Frank Sinatra song. Fly me to the stars in a
I mean,
ship
seriously,
that looks like a duck.
speaking of prog rock,
Like you do.
yeah, it's like number one track, Astro Train. Number two track, Arrow Wing.
The number 3 track, Mountains Come Out of the Sky and Stand There.
Oh, speaking about mountains coming out of the sky, my number 4, 1977. Strange things are afoot in Indiana, and causes this guy to kind of lose his mind a little bit. And he thinks that he's had an encounter with something from outer space, which forces him to drive clear across the country to Devil's Tower,
Wyoming,
where literally a spaceship the size of a mountain descends and plays a little song for everybody. I'm talking about the mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Just this whole buildup. You see all these little tiny spaceships all throughout the movie. And then suddenly you get to the mothership and you're like, holy cow, these are people that are indeed transversing space and maybe even time. And they need a big ship to do it. And then Roy Neary just climbs on board and goes away and sings a little Pinocchio song. My number 4, the mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That was on the other day, and I love that whole musical sequence.
The cool thing about that musical sequence, I mean, I know this is all John Williams, but they never talk about it in the movie. But in the novelization, which was written by Steven Spielberg, that giant rainbow wall, the government borrowed from Stevie Wonder. Because he was on tour and he had this big, light up wall that was this really cool thing that hooked into his keyboard, and the government borrowed it so that when they could go out into the desert to talk with spaceships, they had a way to communicate. So that's what you can only find in the novelization of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which brings us to Matthew's number 4, top 5 spaceships.
My number 4, and I didn't plan this, but it's always good when this happens, actually has a thematic link to my number 5. My number 5 was a Transformer. And of course, the Transformers were brought to America as a collection of transforming toys from 3 different toy lines in Japan. And one of those was called, in Japan, I believe, Bioman. Or Microman, rather. And the Microman toy line, the Microman toy line actually split up into different things. Some of them became Transformers. You can usually tell a Microman toy line because the Transformer has a little space where a guy could sit. Like the Dinobots have little pilot seats. But some of the rest of the Microman toys came to America from a different company under the name the Micronauts. And the Micronauts had the greatest toy. My cousin Travis, who is not my cousin Elwood, different cousin, had this toy, the Micronauts Mega Battle Cruiser. And the Micronauts were they were buildy toys in that sort of erector set kind of Lincoln log sort of way.
In a weird way, because you could swap them out and put a guy's body on a horse or something like that,
Right, and the Battle Cruiser was huge. It was 8 different things, and parts of it you could take off and make smaller ships, and a couple of them you could take off and you'd have a little dart gun, which you can't do anymore in America. But it was this massive build-a-toy that you could take apart and make into different toys, and you could have little toys and big ships, and it's the one ship that was 8 different ships, and it was completely interchangeable with any other Micronauts toy. So you'd have these little pegs and magnets and things that hold it all together. And the configurations were theoretically endless. And by theoretically, I mean they weren't endless, but there were a lot of them. And you could do really cool stuff with it. And I was always really jealous that Travis had the Micronauts Battle Cruiser. And I had, GoBots. I had Screwhead and Rest Q were my GoBots. But if you were to go online, and I'm not saying I have in the year 2017, you would probably be spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get even chunks of a battle cruiser, which is kind of sad. But it does underline that it was the fascinating, the wonderful, the amazing giant Micronaut super mega battle cruiser. One of the coolest toys of when I was a kid. I don't know if you knew this, but I grew up in the 70s.
1 year for my birthday, it must have been the year the Micronauts came out. 1 year for my birthday, my grandmother gave me the orange Micronaut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, Grandma. I don't know what the hell a Micronaut is. And it looks like I'm transforming it into a horse. How does that happen? Oh, I got to buy something else. Well, I guess I've got this action figure that's not compatible with any of my other action figures.
Man, you were a rotten kid.
I didn't really, that was kind of, I enjoyed it. That Micro, in fact, I may still have him around.
I believe his name was Robon.
Was it Takara? No, that was something else.
Takara was one of the characters, or one of the companies, rather.
Yeah. I may still have the around, but I was just always like, this is the odd minifigure. This is, it's like, I guess he's going to be a droid with my Star Wars toys. Because I never knew what it was. But yeah, it's one of those things that instantly I recognize when you go and do a search for that. So cool. I was trying to look really quick on eBay. I thought I saw, here it is. The Micromans. Oh, that's $65, but that's not the one that splits off into a million different pieces.
No, that's not the battle cruiser.
No, that's not the battle cruiser.
Not for $65. And if it is, I want you to tell me where it is, and I'm gonna buy that sucker.
It's on eBay.
Right now.
Everything's on eBay.
Yeah, you know what else is on eBay? $7,000 for a Gokaiger battle changer. So these people just make stuff up.
I'm gonna make one of those up. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 4?
Let's see. Oh yeah, my number 4 is you guys ever watch Silverhawks?
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
Terrible.
It was in the best possible way. It's about metal people, cyborgs flying around in space and shooting lasers from their shoulders.
And pew-pewing.
Yeah. Now, what's cool about Silverhawks is that it's a bunch of guys who just fly around space on their own, but you still need to launch them out of somewhere, largely so you can sell the toy. And so the Silverhawks had a spaceship, which was flown around by a cowboy, and they would go into their little pods, and they'd be like, time to fight this robot, and they'd like shoot out of it.
That was a weird battle cry. Yeah, time to fight this robot. Yeah,
it was. They didn't
it's
really.
No Yo Joe. It's no Transformers roll out. It's no why is our face on our spaceship, which is the Mighty Ducks.
Except it is the Silverhawk ship actually has a bird, a hawk face as well. So mine also has a thematic link in that it's really obvious design. Now, probably the worst part about this ship is that it's called the Mirage, but from everything I could find, it's spelled Maraj. So it's like a misspelled Mirage, or it's just maybe somebody's last name and we never find out about it. I don't know, man. But it also had this weird thing where all the heroes would like shoot out of it except for the pilot, and then the pilot would disengage from the body and like just the head, and then it would zap the body and the body would disappear. I don't think they ever explained why, like not just why they did that, but or how that was accomplished, but why they would even do that. It's just a cool effect, I guess. So yeah, my number 4, the Mirage from Silverhawks.
Cool.
Good memories.
There you go. Number 3, back in the year 1978, Lego introduced the very first minifigure. The minifigure that we know it today. Now, there were various forms before that, but the minifigures that we know today, with the heads and the arms and the legs and the torso bits, that didn't come about until 1978. And they were introduced in 3 sets that came out over the next couple of years. A town set, a castle set, and the space line, which introduced us to the space minifigures, which is where I really found out more about the minifigures, was through the space line and that early 1979 space line, 78, 79. My parents basically bought me that entire first run. It was the coolest stuff that I ever had. I didn't get all of it. I didn't get the giant Galaxy Explorer, but my number 3 spaceship of all time is Lego set 487, the Space Cruiser. Looks like a little space shuttle. Fits 2 guys in it. Had a little forklift that you could pull out a little a white container from the back of the spaceship and put a little green Lego brick in there for whatever sample you were pulling out. Oh, I would take that thing apart and build it together and take it apart and put it together. I played with my Lego minifigures so much that, first of all, yes, in the Lego movie where you see Benny's helmet cracked right there at the chin area, all but one of my original space minifigures have that because they just broke. Number 2, I played with them so much that the Lego space logo on the front has rubbed off of most of them. But I love the Space Cruiser. I still have it today. And it is by far one of the best spaceships you will ever see. The Lego Space Cruiser, set 487 from 1979. Yeah. What do you have for number 3, Matthew?
My number 3 is, I think, my obvious choice. And it's one that I really had to reference. There's no way that you can talk spaceships and not reference this particular intellectual property, if you will. But I also had to argue with myself over which ship was the coolest, because there's a ton of cool ships in the Star Wars. You got that roundy ship with the big solar panels, and you got the weird roundy ship with the bent solar panels, and you got the one that's shaped like a Y, and the one that's kind of goes clickety-cloo, and you have that weird 57 Chevy ship that Luke drives on Tatooine. But I kind of had to go with the big one, the hamburger with the olive sticking out the side, the Millennium Falcon, for 2 reasons. When I was a young boy, I don't know if you knew this, Rodrigo, but I grew up in the 70s. When I was a young boy, for Christmas one year, my mother actually bought me the Kenner Millennium Falcon toy.
Nice.
It was awesome. It was awesome. And being a destructive little bastard, I eventually, broke it into 1,000 pieces and intentionally damaged it in some cases. And I'm like, what a douche. But also, it's the only spaceship currently in my living room. It's behind the glass with a little light to light it. We got the Lego Millennium Falcon for my birthday a couple of years ago, and Widget and I spent probably 3 weeks putting it all together.
Was that the episode? Was that the episode 7 version?
Yeah, it's the one from The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
with old Han Solo, and it comes with a BB. And my daughter thought it was really cool to take the BB android and stick a banana on his head. So now wherever he goes, there's a banana on BB-8's head, which I think is kind of nice. But in nerd speak, it's the Corellian YT 1300 light freighter, and the offset cockpit is designed for better clarity of vision so that the 2 front pieces can be used for the moving of cargo. I really hate myself for saying that, much less, for knowing that. But it's a really amazing ship, and it's kind of saucery and kind of not. And it's one of the first times that I realized that they're in space, right? Spaceships always, for a long time, looked like airships. They looked like airplanes. They looked like rockets. But you don't need those control surfaces in space. You're not using the air to navigate. You don't need wings. You don't need ailerons. You don't need rudders. And the Millennium Falcon is one of the first places that I realized that it's basically a trailer. It's a Winnebago in space. And I think that that's really pretty cool. And the fact that it is just basically a collection of junk glued together, and it's become such an iconic shape and such an iconic looking device, you cannot help but love the Millennium Falcon. My number 3, Han Solo's home and bachelor pad.
Cool. Rodrigo, what is your number 2? I'm very excited to find out. Or I'm sorry, your number 3. I'm excited to find out what it is.
All right.
I'm also excited to find out what your number 2 is, but that's coming in the next round.
That's
we'll
later.
Get to it.
Were you born in the 70s, Rodrigo?
I was not.
Oh, man.
I was born in the 80s, so there's a lot more synth than mine.
And I ran.
Yep. So my number 2 comes from a television show that a lot of people like, a lot of people don't like. And it's made it into my list, not necessarily because of the capabilities of the ship. If you guys, or if any of the listeners are Star Trek fans, you know that there's lots of Star Trek ships to choose from. And, the Enterprise is obviously the biggest, most popular one. There's like even bigger ships of the same design or whatever. But my number 3 is Voyager, not because it's the biggest ship or the strongest ship. I do like the saucer incorporated into the body design a little bit more than the saucer separated design. I think it looks good. But really, what makes Voyager, what gets Voyager into my list, whereas the Enterprise doesn't, or a lot of the other, I don't know, the Delta Flyer, I don't know, doesn't get it into the Warbird. I know ships. What gets him into the list?
Romulan Warbird.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Okay.
That's about the extent of my. Tasha Yar dies, and there's something called a Warbird. That's all I know.
No, that's Warburton. He played. No, never mind.
Yeah. In any case, what gets it on the list is the fact that the opening for, the open for Voyager doesn't have a speech like a lot of the other ones do. So it's just shots of Voyager flying around. And when my girlfriend makes me watch Voyager, because she loves it, I have a little song that I sing along with it, which changes every time, but the chorus is always, it's Voyager, I'm Voyager, the ship. And I do describe the whole intro as though the ship is alive and wondering what adventures it's going to get into in this episode.
That sounds awesome. I love the fact that it looks like the spoons at my favorite Japanese restaurant.
Oh boy. So that's your number 3.
My number
Voyager.
I do like
Voyager. I do like the shape of that. That does have a good shape.
I think it's a good design. I think, it's a good riff on the iconic Star Trek ship design.
That central thing with the pylons. It's a little shoehorny, but not so much that you're like, that's clearly a shoehorn. It's got kind of aspects of a lot of things to it.
Sure.
Kind of looks like a running shoe, so maybe you do need that shoehorn.
Yeah, there you go.
Brings us to my number 2. Listen. If you are going to defend the frontier against Azure and the Kodan Armada, you are going to need the Gunstar and its Death Blossom.
Oh.
The Last Starfighter was a movie that came along at the perfect time for me. And I just love this whole idea about this kid living in a trailer park, had aspirations to be somebody different, something bigger than, the janitor plugging people's toilets every
at the Roll-A-Rama.
And, he finds this video game that he's really good at. And the video game comes alive one night and sends a message out into space. And then suddenly the Music Man shows up and says, hey, kid, I got a thing to change your life. And it's called music. And here's the monorail. Takes him off into space, introduces him to the real conflict, and they realize that the video game is just a training module to find new pilots for these Gunstar ships. And the Gunstar is, you can tell it's a battleship. It's got a little cockpit on the front, but the rest of the ship is engines and weapons. And even in cruddy 1984 CGIs, it looks great. And
it's a good-looking ship.
That is why the Gunstar is my number 2.
Starts with G, and that rhymes with T, and that stands for trouble.
Yes.
Right here on Declon Beta.
Oh, boy. What is your number 2, Matthew?
My number 2 is only a little bit of a cheat. And I say that because I come from a perspective. I don't know if you guys know this, but I grew up in the 70s.
The one where you don't follow
and
rules?
So, no, actually, in the 70s, science fiction technology, and especially the visual techniques for showing that science fiction technology were not always, what's the word I'm looking for? Good. And so in my initial interactions with this particular ship, it was mostly sitting there on the ground. At one point, it was a pipe organ. But by 2005, when Doctor Who returned to the air, they had sufficient digital technology to show the TARDIS traveling through space and time. And the way that it does that is basically it spins like a dreidel, and occasionally it lands on Gelt. And so the TARDIS is my number 2 because, well, first of all,
I don't think that's
it's
a
really
cheat.
No,
It is-
it's straight up a spaceship. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah,
I agree.
it travels through space and time. It's right there in its title.
the external shots of it as this blue police box spinning in space, it's just really, really cool. And the fact that, the doctor is this lone nut running around trying to fix things and yelling about conspiracy theories, wearing a tinfoil hat, sometimes literally, and just wandering through the universe, having adventures kind of like Kane from Kung Fu in an ugly rainbow coat, just always fascinated me. And the fact that the ship is so versatile, but looks perfectly, normal. It's if you're in 1963 London, you'll see one on every street corner. Everywhere else in the universe, it looks freaky enough that nobody even knows what it is. And by being so weird, it actually comes right back around to normal and mundane again, and nobody ever questions it. And I really kind of love that. And even though they've really beaten it to death with the new series, the idea that it is bigger on the inside is fascinating. I love that concept that, it looks like it's 8 feet high and 4x4, but there's a swimming pool in there. Sometimes it's got infinite mass, depending on who you're talking about. At one point, it was a girl who looked remarkably like Helena Bonham Carter. I don't know what that was all about. But the TARDIS, my number 2, it's a fascinating ship, and also one of the only acronyms on my list.
There you go. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 2?
My number 2 is a spaceship, but it is also a creature, or rather, it's a creature that directly inhabits the spaceship, not like lives in it and like drives it around, but is like suffused into it. And I don't think the spaceship itself has a name. I'm talking about Quizlet from Legion of Superheroes, who is a tiny spaceship that hangs out with a bunch of superheroes. And everybody's like, "Oh, what should we do now, tiny spaceship?" And he's like, "We should fight the bad guys." I don't know what Quizlet's supposed to sound like, but I assume he has a little voice. Also,
he's got a big old bass baritone.
Sure. It's like
Quizlet.
No matter what.
Yeah, let us go fight some
like,
bad guys.
If he sounds like a chipmunk, that's great. If he sounds like
Kevin Michael Richardson,
yeah, like Kevin Michael Richardson, that's great too. It's like no matter what, it's great. Yeah. Let's go, fellas. Pew 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 pew.
Look out, polar boy.
So yes, of course, Quizlet is the main part of my dream team of Legionnaires, which is Quizlet, Gates, Telos, Shikari,
all the weird aliens,
Saturn Girl and Phantom Girl.
Right.
So basically, it's 3 monsters and 3 cute girls, one of which is a monster. And then you can rotate the rest of the cast. You can have everybody in there too, like I don't know, Block,
Timberwolf, Wildfire.
Yep, You know what I mean.
Dawnstar, Magno, Gear.
Yep, all of those guys.
Trailbreaker.
Which one's the one that's? Isn't there a snake? A snake with like robot arms?
Yes. Projectra. Yeah, the Earth 247 Projectra is a snake.
There you go. So yes, definitely that. So yeah,
she's also a pretty girl.
Oh well, there you go. See, again, it bridges the gap. Quizlet is a character that I feel doesn't get a lot of play. It doesn't reappear in a lot of, because there's 17,000 versions of the Legion, right? And I feel that it came around at a time when people were like, yeah, the Legion. And then, every reboot tends to focus on your, Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, kind of like your classic Legionnaires. Brings in some new ones, changes up some other ones, but I feel like your weird monster fringe ones don't really get a lot of love every time the Legion gets rebooted. So here's a vote for Quizlet next time.
All right. And listeners, if you want to find out more about the Legion of Superheroes, then I would suggest you check out one of our other podcasts called the Legion Clubhouse, where Matthew and I sit down and we talk about the Legion of Superheroes as their appearances roll out and why they were important for that time period that they appeared in. Go check it out. Yep. It's the Legion Clubhouse. Quizlet we may get to in the year 2999. But
well, let's see. It showed up in 1985, so it should be episode 310.
Probably somewhere around there. But go check it out. The Legion Clubhouse. Find it over at majorspoilers.com or in the podcast server of your choice. All right, we are up to our number ones, the most exciting part of the show. And my number one is the best spaceship of all time.
Number one.
Because at one point, the President of the United States stood up and said, "It is our goal by the end of the decade to send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth." And in 1969, before the decade was out, Apollo 11 did just that. There is no greater spaceship in the world than Apollo 11. Except maybe Apollo 12, but definitely not Apollo 13. And Apollo 17 was kind of a dud. But Apollo 11, ladies and gentlemen, my number one spaceship.
Classic tidbit about Apollo 11, the Apollo missions in general, is that, you know, your average smartphone nowadays has more sophisticated and even more computing components than those ships had, right?
Right. Yep. Another thing is that NASA spent millions trying to design a ballpoint pen that could write in zero gravity. And they went to the Russians and said, "How are you guys doing?" And they're like, "We use pencil." Matthew, what is your number one?
They said, "We use pencil. Waka waka." My number one.
No, that was actually their answer, is that they use pencils.
I know. That's what makes it funny. Okay, so here's the deal. There are things that you know are quantitatively wonderful. There are things that you know are perfect, and then there's Steven. And there are things that you say to yourself, "I love this because I was 9 when it came out. And it sucks, but that's okay." Because my number one spaceship is one of the greatest spaceships, a spaceship that casts a shadow over my memory for the last 30-odd years for two reasons. One, it is intentionally designed to resemble a Gothic cathedral with lots of towers and weird flying buttresses and fer-de-lances and John de-Lanceys and Framalama ding-dongs everywhere on the ship. And if you get inside, the giant screens look like stained glass windows, and the crazy little robots that populate the ship could look kind of like monks. And there's a point during the movie, The Black Hole, where the United States Cygnus, Space Probe 1, first lights up, and it is just awe-inspiring, whoa, kind of a goosebump movie. And, you know, if they did it in today's films, they would go, bong! But they didn't do that in 1979 because they still had class. But the Cygnus
still had class, yet they still put out that movie.
Fascinating. It's a fascinating part of a fascinating movie. And still have, actually. I don't have most of the parts, and it's been beaten to heck, but I still have the model kit of the Cygnus that I got when I was 9. And it occupies a place of honor in my office, which is weird because my office doesn't have a lot of places of honor. But it's a really, really gorgeous ship. And apparently when Disney made the movie The Black Hole, they actually made like a 40-foot model of this ship, which they then gave to the Smithsonian Institution on the expectation that someone should hang on to this just in case the movie was like a huge blockbuster, expecting it to be the next Star Wars. It was not the next Star Wars. However,
that would be Battlestar Galactica.
The Cygnus is a gorgeous, gorgeous ship. It's incredibly complex and dense and weird, and you can just stare at it for days and days. Go right now to your favorite search engine and search USS Cygnus, parentheses, the black hole, end parentheses. because otherwise you're going to get like an aircraft carrier.
It looks like a giant lit up electric guitar in space. It is beautiful. It is a beautiful ship.
But, it is a beautiful ship.
Wow. It got what it deserved at the end of that movie.
Hey. You know what? We haven't done a bonus tracks of that movie.
No, I was thinking we kind of did, because we had that really big, long discussion on the Major Spoilers podcast years ago where we had, it's kind of like, proto bonus tracks, where we discussed Black Hole in detail. I don't remember if Rodrigo was part of that or not. For some reason, I think it was just you and me.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I saw the Black Hole probably when I was 5, and I don't think I ever saw it again. So I have. Here's what I remember about the Black Hole. There's 2 cute robots, and there's a scene I want to say. Well, they both have. The robots from the Black Hole are cute. Come on, that's.
No, I'm just saying they're comparing.
Oh, sure. And then I want to say there's a scene where somebody hands this multi-alien a hot dog, and he feeds it to one of his other heads, and then they all chew it. Or am I thinking of something else?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
You're thinking of something else.
Okay. Then that's how long it's been.
Yeah.
You know how long it's been since I watched The Black Hole? About
25
minutes.
Oh, okay.
45 seconds, yeah.
12
I'm watching
days.
It now, 45 minutes ago.
I've been watching it every time your lists are going.
Yeah. I watched it 15 minutes ago, Dan. I'm not a Republican serial villain.
What do you have for your number 1?
Let me see. So my number 1.
He wrote it on the back of his hand, and
I write all of my top 5s on this huge book, and so I have to like flip through all these pages because I arrange them. But I don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I put all my 5s in one chapter, all my 4s in another chapter. It's terrible. It's not very organized. Well, it's very organized, but it doesn't work anyway.
And he doesn't have page numbers. He goes by thickness.
I don't. I have to. Those like little divots in pages. I have to cut those out myself. In any case, my number 1. I had the other 4 on this list all day, pretty much. And I was like, I need another like number 2, 3-ish to put in here. And I remember this ship, and I was like, no, this has to be number 1 because I love this ship and I love the show that it comes from, and I love all the weird little things that they do with it all the time. And that's the Planet Express ship from Futurama. Futurama. Yeah, Futurama is great satire in every direction, right? It's great satire of the time when it was coming out. It's great satire for science fiction. They have if you enjoy sci-fi, Futurama has you covered in some way. If you would like to see jokes about Star Wars, Star Trek, the Twilight Zone, anything, like Futurama did it at some point. And very frequently the Planet Express ship was at the center of it because there's lots of stuff to do with spaceships. They discover at some point, or the Planet Express ship gains sentience and starts dating Bender for a while.
Planet Express ship, cover your shame.
Yeah, that's a great line. They discover that it's Professor Farnsworth, when he built it, its engine doesn't actually propel it forward. Rather, it just moves the entire universe around it. Where I think scientifically speaking, that is how movement in the universe works anyway, because everything's relative, but just roll with it. It has an antimatter drive, which I think sometimes Nibbler either eats or maybe his poop is antimatter and they can use it as fuel. I don't know, man. There's lots of great adventures that they've had in the Planet Express ship. It's a really iconic looking ship. It looks really dumb in a lot of ways, but it's really cool. It's
very
like
retro.
Very like it is. It's just like that look where it's a 50s rocket ship, like just inflated to a ridiculous extent to make it live in a Matt Groening universe, right? It just like they always say, or Matt Groening's thing was like, your characters have to be iconic enough that you have to be able to see them see an outline of them and immediately be able to tell who they are. You can do that with Bart Simpson, obviously, with Fry, with Bender, and the Planet Express ship as well. So even vehicles, he manages to pull that off.
Very cool. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Our top 5 spaceships. I think we all had a pretty good list. I don't think there was a dud anywhere. No, those are all really good. Listeners, what do you think? Head over to majorspoilers.com and don't just tell us how great our lists are. We want you to share your great list.
But also,
no, we want you to share your great list.
Tell us how wonderful we are, then share your list.
No, we don't need to be told that we're wonderful. We're just doing a good job for you guys because we love all of our listeners, wherever they may be around the world, or if they're listening up in the International Space Station. I haven't got any podcast information about if there are any podcasts being listened to in the International Space Station, but that'd be pretty cool if we could get them to play our top 5 spaceships on the ISS.
Spaceship!
Yeah, make it happen, NASA or whoever's monitoring that thing. Do it.
NASA, NSA.
Yes. And while you're over there at majorspoilers.com, make sure you fill in the comment section with your list of top 5 spaceships because we would love to read them because everybody loves a list. And if you want to see top 5 continue and bring you more lists and even more lists and even more lists for years to come until we have to actually do a top 5 list, here's what you need to do. Head to patreon.com/majorspoilers. Just a couple of bucks a month. $2, $5, $10. You can even go higher if you want. A little bit goes a long way here at Major Spoilers. And if we can get every single one of you, here's a deal I will make. If we can get every single one of you who are listening to this show right now to head over to patreon.com/majorspoilers and sign up even at the $2 level, we can easily make top 5 a weekly show. Can you guys make that happen? It's in your hands. Patreon.com/majorspoilers. Thanks so much for checking us out. Until next time, take care.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.